2001, the Northern Uprisings broke out simultaneously in the cities of Oldham, Bradford and Burnley. The spark that lit the uprisings was anger against the police for failing to stop far-right supporters marching into Asian neighbourhoods. These events involving young Asian men were in reality an expression of pent-up anger against racism, discrimination and aggressive policing. The government's response was to launch a series of inquiries that led to the publication of a number of reports. It was the Candle Report that first introduced the term community cohesion and the notion of communities living parallel and segregated lives. Labour adopted the terminology and applied it in relation to Muslim communities. Consequently, race equality departments, offices and strategies were replaced with community cohesion departments, offices and strategies. Millions of pounds have been invested in community cohesion since 2001. But do communities, and especially young people, know what community cohesion really means?
No. Is it how they bond and how they live in the community and how everything works? Something on them lines.
I'm not sure, but I guess it's like when you have cohesive teams, it might be something like that.
I can't get it out.
I don't know.
Mixed race and different religions and all sorts of communities working together.
It's when all the community gets together, yeah, and if they got any problems, they sort it out.
I got a Scooby. It's where, like, say a black community, a white community, or like Pakistani community, English community, Indian, them like mixing together. We don't really get on. Some people get on, but not most of us.
They keep themselves to themselves, we keep ourselves to ourselves.
My friends, I'd say 90% of them are white, my friends, and mainly at my school as well, so I haven't got a problem mixing with white people.
In Bradford, the youth clubs, you have one area that will be predominantly Mirapuri, so all the children in that area will go to the Mirapuri Youth Club, and then in another area it will be predominantly Afro-Caribbean, and all the Afro-Caribbean kids will be going there. And the children don't have a kind of central point at the moment in Bradford where they can go.
In college, I get along with white people, we hang around with them. But if you look at it on a national basis, if you go to different areas, you'll see black communities, you'll have Asian communities, you'll have Polish, you'll have white people. They all hang around in their own gangs. It's very rare that you see them all mixed.
Because when we walk about and stuff, so we get little Asian kids and big Asian kids starting on you for no reason. Go, you white bastard, and all that. Say if we jumped an Asian lad, we'd get done for like racism and stuff like that. But if they jumped one of us, it'd be no, they'd just go, it'd just be assault.
It's like, if I stand on my own against a lot of white people, it's a bit more scary, but Asian communities like to walk around in gangs, they feel safer.
The white communities have a greater fear of Asian and Muslim communities than is the opposite way around, because of certain policies around the community cohesion agenda that feeds the notion that Asian and Muslim communities are something to be afraid of. You then have white communities who are quite happy to take on that argument and have the far-right messages coming into their communities.
I vote for BNP because they do things for British people who were born in England, and they don't like do stuff for immigrants because they're not English.
If you're going to call it community cohesion, then there needs to be a very clear strategy that encompasses all communities, whether that's Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, Jewish, white, black, any colour, any creed, whatever.
I just do not agree with a white person and a black or Asian person putting them together in the same room or in the environment and something in the atmosphere is going to change between those people. I find it so frustrating that so much money can be just washed down the drain without making any impact in the community.
People are really going into their own ethnic groups in order to kind of protect, almost distancing themselves from the Muslim community as well.
There are two kind of camps. It's a bicultural city, if you like. You've got the mosque on one side and you've got the church on the other side, and the valley goes through like that. And communities are polarized, in my opinion, okay? And within them, there are hardcore nuts. Community cohesion in one sense, in a drastic manner, is a dehumanization actually process, if you like. So if we humanize these communities and look at the needs in terms of, well, basically right to live, right to have a life of opportunities and access to this and all that, I think that is denied even to the white working classes, leave alone these so-called the other who have come in here. There needs to be investments in terms of jobs, in terms of addressing real issues to do with schooling, mainly working class Mirpuri Muslims and working class Bangladeshi kids.
The problems that we had 10 years ago, 5 years ago, are still the problems in the next 5 and 10 years. So, and a lot of them exist around the needs of BME communities, especially young men, and you know, what I call the floor targets of employment, crime, education, health. So we need that support.
The cohesion policy is written in a corridor, in an office, out of the way, and the people that are writing it are not connected to the communities. That's wanting you to get rid of all your own identities and just be a blur of one. We're bullied into just taking on bits of work to survive.
The community cohesion policies now very much become intertwined with preventing violence and extremism agenda, and quite often there's confusion and overlap between the two. In fact, most people regard one very much as the other. I don't think there's really been that joined up thinking at that senior policy level between community cohesion and the economic environment within which BME communities have to reside. And I think that's something where, you know, certainly more work is required.
It actually problematises ethnic minority communities and puts all of the onus on them to really overcome the structural inequalities that they face, rather than the people who already have power in society. Not only do we have to be good citizens, we have to pay our taxes, we have to obey the law, but on top of that also we have to, you know, maintain positive relations with other communities. We have to be in the key driving seat there. It's almost a case that, you know, we're completely set up to completely fail. And so no matter what I do in terms of trying to engage in society, I'll still be seen as an outsider. And what we don't have is a united front of people saying that, no, this is unacceptable as a policy. We want the policy framed in a way which addresses core inequality and injustice.
If the government see that, they actually, you know, open their eyes and see that the problems are kind of across the board, because they do kind of live similar lives. You know, we live in a rundown area, and so do they. And so why are we approaching one side and not the other side? And then that again builds more animosity. They get everything, they've got all the jobs, they get all the money, they get all the regeneration.
What we need to see is a deconstruction of the argument from the far right and a reconstruction of a more moderate argument, and the way to do that is through the more moderate politics and more moderate parties.
The fractionalising of the BME caucus and the whole BME community within Britain, okay, is a deliberate policy. And through that, it's completely, you know, derogate the importance of race equality.
We need to talk in terms of identities, and we need to talk in terms of cultures. And we don't need to talk in terms of racism, we need to talk in racisms, and so on and so on. There are pluralities of expression.
In policy circles, if you go to local authorities, statutory agencies now, you will hardly ever hear mentioned the word racism or institutionalised racism. A core group of workers who have been incorporated into the public sector now, whose whole vernacular has changed away from human rights and equality towards cohesion and integration.
To have a policy that sort of stems from Whitehall across the cities and districts and areas, to me, isn't going to work. Let those people who work in those areas or know those areas, let them develop a local policy.
The further up the ladder you go, is that the further disconnected people are. Funders and policymakers and department heads should be coming to us and saying, how can we support you to do more of this? We don't want monies, or we don't want you know, handouts in the way. We just want an equal shout. And that's where the failure is, that people are not advocating on behalf of the BME community.
That's a tough question.
I can't think of any minister to be able to come along. Sorry to be so pessimistic and sound like it's just a complete lost hope.
I just feel as if people like Trevor Phillips have a strong bond with the government. It seems more like a quango now. Some of these people are real puppets for the government.
In my opinion, he's inconsistent and also quite swayed by different pressures. You need an instinct for justice. If you are polished up like Mr. Blair was, then that's what happens.
When you talk about ministers and MPs and councillors, forget those further up, because they're so compounded with policy and are very internal. They can't see the world outside of the sort of officers, really.
There isn't really a government minister that I could stand up and say, yes, they're championing this, they're doing it right, because the system doesn't allow them to do that, I don't think.
I'm always inspired by people like Tony Benn or Robin Cook, but people who are not going to toe the party line, who are going to say it as it is.
George Galloway, Jeremy Corbyn, maybe Gerald Kaufman, maybe a few others, not many, but there are some principled people out there that I would trust.
People like Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, people like that, but they've inspired change.
I used to quite like Mr. Benn, actually. I think he's a fair-minded person. Whenever I hear him, he makes sense to me.
I work in the Hamara centres. I'm probably a bit biased, to be honest. I'd say someone like Hanif Malik. He does a great job. He's worked with the community for years.
The children of this project are our champions. They're the people that actually turn up and have a care for the work that we're doing.
Dr. Martin Luther King. Every time I listen to his speech, it makes me warm inside. And also it inspires me. When you listen to the speech, you can hear the crowd, and you can hear I can just picture an African Caribbean woman just in the background saying, "Hell yeah!" already acting on them words before they even come out, and we're ready to do this, and we're ready to have community action. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will be judged not by the colour of the skin, but by the content of their nature. I have a dream! I have a dream today that one day down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor
having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.